It was early morning in the small dusty town that sat quietly between two long hills. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft colors of orange and gold. A light wind moved through the wooden streets, lifting the dust like smoke. This was a place where news traveled fast, where everyone knew each other, and where the sound of boots on the ground could be heard from far away. Sheriff Thomas Callahan walked slowly toward the town council building. His boots made soft sounds against the wood, and the silver star on his chest caught the first light of the sun. Thomas had worn that star for nearly 10 years. It was not just a sign of power. To him, it was a sign of duty. He believed in keeping the peace even when the town was not easy to control. People trusted him. He was a quiet man, thoughtful, strong, but kind. Inside the small wooden building, 5 council members sat around a long table. They were waiting for him. Their faces were serious. One of them, Mr. Grady, was the oldest and spoke first. "Sheriff," he said in a flat voice, "we need to talk about the girl." Thomas stood straight, his hands behind his back. "What girl?" he asked, though deep down he already knew. "The Apache girl," Mr. Grady answered. "The one they brought in last night." Thomas took a slow breath. He had seen her when she arrived. She had been quiet, her hands tied loosely with a piece of rope, her head slightly down, but her eyes, those dark, calm eyes, had looked straight ahead without fear. She couldn't have been more than 17 or 18. The council members continued talking. "The people want to see justice," another man said. "She must be taken to the market in the next town. She'll be handed over like the others. That's what the law says." Thomas said nothing for a moment. The room felt heavy. He had followed many difficult orders in his life, but something about this one sat wrong in his chest. He had always believed in the law, but he also believed in what was right. "She's just a girl," he finally said, his voice quiet. "She's one of them," another councilman replied. "You know what that means. The people won't accept anything less." Thomas nodded slowly, though inside he felt something strong, a quiet storm rising. He looked at each man sitting around the table. They were talking about a person as if she were a thing. When the meeting ended, he walked out without another word. The sunlight outside felt brighter, but his heart felt heavy. He walked toward the small wooden jail at the edge of town. The building was old but clean. Inside, in the single cell, sat the young Apache woman. She was sitting on the floor, her legs crossed, her hands resting gently in her lap. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders. She looked calm, almost like someone who had accepted everything that was coming. When Thomas entered, she raised her head slowly. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Thomas saw something in her eyes that surprised him. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was quiet strength. She was not begging, not crying. She was just still. He pulled a chair from the corner and sat down outside the bars. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her head slightly tilted. "Ayanna," she answered in a quiet, careful voice. Thomas repeated the name slowly. "It was a beautiful name. Do you understand why you're here?" he asked. She nodded once.
"Yes," she said.
Her English was simple but clear. "They say I must take you to another town," he explained. "They want to give you away." "That's the order." Ayanna didn't move. "I know," she said. "I have no choice." Her calmness made his chest tighten. She spoke like someone who had seen too much, like someone who had learned not to hope. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, almost to himself. Ayanna looked at him for a moment, then said, "It is not your fault." But Thomas felt that it was in some way. He was the sheriff. He was the one holding the keys. He was the one the town trusted to carry out its orders. Even if he didn't give the command, he would be the one to make it happen. For the rest of the day, Thomas tried to do his work. He checked on the horses, walked through the town, spoke to people, but nothing felt the same. He could hear the whispers of the townsfolk. "They'll sell her tomorrow," someone said. "Good thing. People will feel safer." Another voice added, "She's one of them. It's what they do." Thomas kept walking, but inside his thoughts were loud. "She's just a girl," he kept repeating in his head. "Just a girl." That evening, as the sun went down, Thomas stood on the porch of the sheriff's office. The sky was red and gold again, and the air was cool. He thought about his late wife, Mary, who had once told him, "Doing what is right is not always what is easy." Those words had guided him for years. He remembered the day Mary had helped a traveler who everyone else had turned away. She had said, Kindness is not weakness, Thomas. It's courage. He had admired that about her, and now those same words echoed in his heart. He walked back inside and sat at his desk. In front of him lay the written order from the council. His name was at the bottom waiting for his signature. His hand hovered over the paper for a long time. His chest felt tight. Signing it would be the easy thing to do. Everyone expected it. It would keep him safe. But it would also mean turning away from everything he believed in. He didn't sign it. Later that night, Thomas walked quietly to the cell. Ayanna was still awake. The soft glow of the oil lamp fell across her face, showing a calm, steady expression. "Do you have family?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Far north," she said. "Many days' walk. Are they safe?" She hesitated. "Maybe, I don't know." Thomas leaned against the bars. "Do you want to go back?" Ayanna looked at him carefully. For a moment it seemed like she didn't trust what she was hearing. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, he swallowed hard. He knew what he was thinking, and it scared him. It wasn't just breaking a rule. It was breaking the law. If anyone found out, he could lose everything, his badge, his name, even his home. But then he looked at Ayanna again. He saw how young she was, how quiet and brave, and something inside him decided. Outside, the town grew silent. The lamps along the street burned low. Everyone was asleep. Thomas sat alone in his office for hours, the ticking of the clock the only sound in the room. He thought of every possible outcome. If he obeyed the order, she would be taken away in the morning, never to return. If he disobeyed, he would lose everything. But if he saved her, at least one life would be free. He touched the badge on his chest. It had always been a symbol of duty, but tonight it felt heavy. Was duty only to the law or also to what is right? Near midnight, Thomas stood up. He took the key from the wall and walked slowly to the cell. Ayanna looked up as he approached. His face was calm, but his heart was beating fast. He unlocked the door gently, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. Ayanna didn't move at first. She stared at him, not understanding. "You have a choice now," he said quietly. "If you stay, they'll take you in the morning. If you go, you might find your way home." She stood slowly, unsure if this was real. "I can't go with you," he said, "but I can give you a chance." For a long second, the world felt still. Then Ayanna stepped forward. Her eyes softened, not with fear, but with something like trust. Thomas handed her a small piece of bread, a blanket, and a canteen of water. "Follow the river north," he whispered. "Keep walking. Don't look back." She held the items gently, her hands trembling slightly. "Why are you helping me?" she asked in a quiet voice. Thomas took a deep breath. "Because you deserve to live," he said, "and because it's the right thing to do." For the first time, Ayanna smiled, a small, gentle smile. As she disappeared into the night, Thomas closed the cell door behind him, leaving it empty. He walked back to his office, sat at his desk, and waited for the sunrise, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. The first light of morning crept slowly over the town, turning the sky from deep blue to soft gold. A few birds began to sing, their voices light and calm. It was the kind of morning that usually made Sheriff Thomas Callahan feel peaceful. But today was different. His chest felt tight, his hands were still cold, and his heart had not stopped racing since the night before. Ayanna was gone now. She had disappeared quietly into the darkness, and Thomas could only hope she was far from the town by now. He sat behind his desk in silence, staring at the empty cell down the hall. A faint line of sunlight reached across the wooden floor like a long finger pointing at the truth. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone found out. The sound of boots echoed outside. People began to wake, stepping out of their homes, lighting fires, and opening their shops. Soon the council would arrive to take her away, but instead they would find nothing but an empty cell. Thomas breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm inside him. He thought about what would happen next. The council would be angry. The town would demand answers. He would have to look them in the eyes and tell them the truth, or face the consequences quietly. A knock came at the door. "Sheriff." It was Deputy Miller, a young man with an eager voice. "They're here." Thomas rose slowly, straightening his jacket. His silver badge glimmered faintly in the sunlight. He placed his hat on his head and walked to the door with a steady step, even though his legs felt heavy. Outside, the 5 council members stood in a line. Behind them, a small crowd of townsfolk had gathered. Some were curious, some were impatient. Everyone was expecting the same thing, to see the sheriff lead the young Apache woman away in chains. Mr. Grady, the oldest council member, stepped forward. "Sheriff," he said firmly, "bring her out." "The wagon's ready." Thomas met his eyes. "She's gone." A wave of whispers moved through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. "What do you mean she's gone?" Mr. Grady demanded. "She escaped," Thomas said simply. His voice was calm, steady. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. "How could she escape under your watch?" Another councilman asked. "You were responsible for her." Thomas didn't look away. "I know." The crowd began to murmur louder. Some faces showed surprise, others anger. A few looked uncertain, like they didn't know what to believe. Mr. Grady took a slow step forward. "Sheriff Callahan," he said, his voice sharp. "Do you understand what this means? She was to be handed over today. You've let her disappear." Thomas nodded slowly. "I understand." "Then tell us," Mr. Grady pressed, "how did she escape?" The wind lifted the brim of Thomas's hat. For a moment everything felt still. Then he answered in a quiet but clear voice. "I opened the door." The words fell into the air like stones into water. The whispers stopped. The entire crowd went silent. "You what?" Someone in the back shouted. "I opened the door," Thomas repeated. "I let her go." For a long moment no one moved. Mr. Grady stared at him as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. "You let her go?" he said, his voice rising slightly. "Do you know what you've done?" "Yes," Thomas said softly. "I do." Mr. Grady's face grew tight. "You've broken the law. You've gone against the town." Thomas took off his hat and held it against his chest. "I've done what I believe is right." The council called a meeting that same afternoon. The entire town gathered in the square. Some stood on porches, others leaned against fences, whispering to one another. Thomas sat alone at the front. He wasn't tied. He wasn't hiding. He was ready. The council members sat at a long table, their faces serious. Mr. Grady spoke first. "Sheriff Thomas Callahan has admitted to releasing the Apache prisoner," he said, his voice loud and clear. "We must decide what happens next." One man in the crowd shouted, "He betrayed the law." Another voice added, "He saved a girl." The people were divided. Some believed what he did was wrong. Others saw courage in it. Thomas listened quietly, hands folded in his lap. He had no speech prepared, no clever words. He only had the truth. Finally, Mr. Grady turned to him. "Sheriff Callahan," he said, "do you wish to explain why you broke the order?" Thomas stood. His boots made a soft sound against the wooden floor. He looked at the faces before him, faces he had protected for years, faces that once trusted him without question. "She was just a girl," he began. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the crowd. "She wasn't a danger to anyone. She hadn't hurt anyone. She was alone, far from home. And the law asked me to hand her over like she was not a person. I couldn't do it," he paused. "I wore this badge for 10 years. I followed the law. I kept this town safe. But today the law was wrong, and I chose to do what was right." The crowd was silent. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded slowly. Mr. Grady leaned back, his fingers tapping the table. "Then you understand, Sheriff, that by your own words you can no longer wear that badge." Thomas nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "I understand." He reached up, unclipped the silver star from his chest and placed it on the table. The sound of the metal touching wood was quiet but heavy. It felt like the end of a chapter. The council took away his title that day. Some in the town agreed with their choice. Others didn't. But Thomas accepted it with calm. He walked out of the building as just a man, not a sheriff. The badge was gone, but the weight on his heart felt lighter. The days passed slowly after that. People whispered when he walked by. Some gave him cold looks, but there were also quiet nods of respect, small smiles from people who understood what he had done. Thomas spent more time at his small house near the edge of town. He fixed his fence, took care of his horse, and watched the sunsets that painted the hills in warm colors. He didn't know where Ayanna was, but each night he looked north and hoped she was safe. One afternoon, weeks later, as he was gathering firewood, a rider appeared on the road. The man wore a wide hat and a dusty coat. As he came closer, Thomas saw something hanging from his saddle, a small leather pouch. The rider stopped and handed it to him without a word. Thomas opened the pouch. Inside was a piece of cloth carefully folded. He recognized it immediately. It was a small piece from the blanket he had given Ayanna the night she escaped. Along with it was a short note written in simple, careful letters. I reached home. Thank you. Thomas held the cloth in his hands for a long time. The wind moved softly through the trees, and for the first time in many days he smiled. The town slowly forgot the details of that day. New things happened. New faces arrived. But the story of the sheriff who opened the cell door did not disappear completely. It became a quiet tale told by old folks on calm evenings. They said he lost everything that day. His job, his title, his place of power. But they also said he gained something greater, the freedom of a clear heart. Thomas lived many years after that. He worked on a small farm and helped people when they needed him, even without the badge. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars shone bright over the hills, he thought of a young woman walking north under the same sky, free. He never saw Ayanna again. But he didn't need to. He knew she was out there, living a life she deserved, and that was enough.